In today's episode, critical thinker and chief science officer of C60 Purple Power, Ken Swartz, asks us the question, who is in charge of your health and life destiny? Join us as Ken helps us to unpack this question, show us where our personal choices can be hijacked, obstacles that can sabotage our free will, and how we can get back in the driver's seat of our own health and our own lives. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And in today's episode, which still ties into the series on Know Thyself, I'm bringing in Chief Science Officer of C60 from Purple Power, Ken Swartz. Now, I've gotten to know Ken pretty well over the last year and a half, and I really value Ken as a critical thinker, and he definitely lives his life in a way that I think is in alignment with how he truly feels inside. And so I wanted to bring him on and get his feedback around everything. And he had a really interesting conversation. So a lot of them have been trying to get you back into yourself. A lot of the different guests we've been talking about to sort of ask those questions. And one of the things Ken gets into in this episode specifically is what are some of the things that get in the way of that? And so he specifically asks, what are the spiritual consequences of applying your free will versus not applying your free will? And what we get into is a conversation on some of the different things that have gotten to be the obstacles getting in the way of that. You know, what are the things that get in the way of us making solid, grounded choices that we know deep inside ourselves are the best choice for us? Why do we give our power over? What happens? He talks about trauma-based mind control, and that was actually studied by the CIA and literally perfected by the CIA, and what can actually happen when people are in states of fear, particularly, and how that affects different areas of the brain. We talk about dopamine hijacking, right? And how different aspects of social media and games and advertising and all of these different things can actually affect dopamine levels. It's actually called dopamine hijacking. And I talk about experience I had with that, talking with Dr. Stuart Shanker a long time back, who's an expert in self-regulation, and he talked about that. And Tay and I have actually for a while now, and we will do this at some point, we've been wanting to put a series together that's just called The Illusion of Free Choice. Because a lot of times we think we're making a decision that is based on our own free will, but what we don't realize is that so many factors have kind of played in that have kind of guided us along this path that we maybe think we're making free choices, but we're actually being very much guided in a specific direction. And the more that we become aware of that, you start to see it in so many different ways. I mean, from our beliefs that keep guiding us, if we don't question, if we don't actually sit back and ask ourselves why we do certain things, what do we actually believe? Why do we believe them? But also the stuff that goes on with these areas with propaganda and with advertising and the effects that this can have on the brain. And it's actually very intentionally geared, right? It really is. I mean, you look at the games, I mean, there is millions and millions of dollars spent on perfecting this kind of technology that literally can hijack you into doing certain things. And if you don't believe me, put a kid on a specific game for a while and then try and take it away from them. You will see an addiction and what happens when you pull that away from them after they've been on it for a while. Same thing with adults. I mean, look at how much we're addicted to our devices and whatnot. Now, I'm not saying that these devices don't have a purpose for certain things, but there's a difference between being completely blind to what can be going on and then being aware of what actually can be taking place. Because from that place of awareness, we can now make a choice to take our power back and then decide what we want to do. So we get into lots of interesting stuff, trauma-based mind control, dopamine hijacking, how subliminal advertising and propaganda is literally geared at the brainstem and not the frontal cortex. And also, how do we detox from this so that we do actually step back into a place of sovereignty again and free choice that we are making from our own inner guidance. So I've really learned to respect Ken and the whole company from C60. Whenever I have had sponsors for any product, it is always one that I take myself and that I know the company and the owners, and I know that they come from a very integrous place. I will not work with companies that I do not believe are coming from an integrous place. So I know Ken's mission is to really help people take control of their own health and to do what they can to start to regain their brain function, to regain their health, to lower inflammatory load, to decrease oxidative load on the body. Because once we start to heal ourselves, we also are able to then think clearer and even make better decisions in our lives. So if you want to learn more about C60 from Purple Power, click the link below and use promo code DRLOKEN for a great discount. All right, everybody, I hope you guys enjoy this show, and I look forward to hearing any comments. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And today I'm bringing back Ken Swartz. And you'll have seen Ken in a couple of different interviews we've done before. Ken is the founder of C60 Purple Power and the chief science officer. And I've gotten to know Ken over the last couple of years. And I really admire Ken for being a critical thinker and for really knowing who he is and living his life from that place. So I wanted to bring Ken back and see his insights around this to help us all see where we can arrive at a clear sense of who we are and then live our lives from that place. So Ken, welcome to the show again.
Glad to be on.
Great to have you on here. So how we've been doing this is I'm just going to pass it over to you to start wherever you would like to. So any questions that you've contemplated yourself or that you think would be valuable for the viewers to listen to contemplate, to help them arrive at a deeper sense of self-authority as opposed to authority outside of themselves. So take it away.
Well, I come from sort of a health perspective, and it really comes down to who really is responsible for your health. That's, and also just not that, but to take control of, I can give you the answer sort of, what is there are consequences. Either if you take control of your own health destiny, but not just your health destiny, the whole destiny of your life, whether you're in the driver's seat or you're sitting in the back in the passenger seat. And that's kind of what's the result of your choice, making that choice. And also, I think there's also, it comes down to another thing is what are the spiritual consequences of free will or not applying your free will? And, I'm just I'm kind of more in the reincarnation cycle thing, if people were to put me in a religious box. So, things that you do now could have the effect could affect you for, well, a long, long time to come because it puts you on a different pathway. And also groups appear to be on collective pathways. And those pathways come from the choices that people make during their lives.
I think that's important to consider right now too. And the concept of free will is such an important one. And again, we were talking to another guest a while ago, and one of the things we were talking about that tied back into free will was also where are we getting our direction from? And part of that question was tying back to who's actually making the choices, right? And what we kind of narrowed down in that was you're either getting information from the false self, which would be kind of like the ego mind identity, all the things we think we are that maybe we're not actually, right? It's the patterns, the beliefs, the propaganda, the conditioning that we've been brought up with. And that's often who we associate ourselves as being. That's who we think I am, right? And what they were basically saying is that we can get past that and get more to the essence of who we truly are, and then take directions from that place, we often would make very different choices in life. So a lot of this is trying to get back to that place. And then from there, which is who I think is where health really emanates from. That's really the foundation of it. And when we can start to get directives from that place, all of a sudden we start to move in very different trajectories. Now, one thing you and I were talking about a little bit before we started here, which I think would be really important for people to hear, because one of the main reasons why we started to do this one was because so many people had talked to us about being confused all the time and being worried and being fearful. And from that place, they just didn't know what to do. And then when they were coming from that place of confusion, then it's a lot easier to kind of just hand your decision-making over to somebody else to make those decisions for you, rather than you taking ownership of your own decisions. So maybe you can share a little bit about what you had talked with me around with what happens kind of in the brain around when we're confused, when we're in states of fear, and why it's so important to start to move out of that place so that we can get a different set of information and instructions.
Well, one of the things is when people go into fear, when people are put into fear, the amygdalas, they're like two little almond-shaped things inside your brain there, and they kind of focus the energy coming up from the brainstem. normally they just kind of click forward and take your cerebral cortex and your frontal lobes, and you're fully functioning, like everything's running. But you're calm, kind of thinking the world, right? Understanding it. And then when you get fear, there's the fight and flight reflex, and the amygdala's like click the energy back to the motor centers of the brain, to the visual centers of the brain. And of course, there's a whole bunch of floods of various hormones that go in there. But what happens is the thinking part, the frontal lobes, go into neutral. They aren't, the energy's gone elsewhere. And so when you're in a state of fear, you literally can't think. That's not possible. Everything is just focused on the survival instinct, and you can't think. And so that's exactly, and when you can put people in a state, I mean, the CIA used it as trauma-based mind control. And the key to doing it was you put them in fear, then you program in what you want. And then even later because there's no way they can process, right? It can't be processed. It just goes right in and it's programmed in. And then later, even if you click back forward and you're met with like a thought or that situation, you will automatically program out what has been programmed into you. But look at your television. You watch your television. What is it always is? Fear porn, right? They go down, you sit down, click it on, fear porn. The Russians are coming. Or, then it was, Muslim terrorists. Or it's a deadly virus of some sort, or it's whatever it is. Put them into fear, put the programming in, and then and it works. I mean, I'm sorry, they've turned it into a fine art. They spent tens of billions of dollars to make that happen, and if you let them do it to you, it will happen to you.
We just talked to Kathy O'Brien a little while back in this series too, and she's had very direct experience with a lot of that stuff, and she's written actually volumes of information around and done documentaries on this too, to try and show people how that does happen and how you can get sort of stuck in, and then also how to actually heal yourself from it. So all of this stuff is stuff that you can eventually get out of and regain your own sense of self from there. But I think what Ken's talking about too is be very mindful of what you expose yourself to. I really think that's really important. I mean, this is a part of free will. This is a part of taking self-authority back. It's like, be very conscious of what you allowed into your field in all aspects of that. So what kind of people do you allow in? What information do you allow in? It can be very tricky. Sometimes I know, even when you're aware of it, even if you know that this effect that Ken's talking about, where when you are under fear, that you do allow information in with kind of out the regular ways of discretion around it, it just sort of sinks in. And sometimes you might even be watching stuff, because sometimes you're even watching things on TV and you're kind of almost getting to a bit of a trance just watching it. Even if you're aware of the fact that that could happen and you think that you can kind of rise above it, most of the time you still can't. It's like, if you are still being exposed to it, it's going in there somewhere, and there's a lot of background stuff that can be taking place. And you can often just be amping up that fight or flight response without being totally aware of it. So I always think, if you do check in on stuff like that, if you do watch aspects of TV and news, you need to really get away and balance it with stillness and times in nature and stuff that's going to try to rebalance that as much as you can. And I know personally, we've just cut off immensely from any of that stuff, because I just don't want to be exposed to it much anymore. And you can find out what's going on in the world without having to spend your morning and your middle of your day and before bed being inundated by it. So I think take a break. And what we've encouraged most people to do during this series is, if you can, take a break from it. Take a week off, try to take a break completely from some of that stuff and engage in some of these questions. See what the inner authority has to say, as opposed to what we know the outer authority is constantly saying.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And also, it's just not, government control, but there's also advertising. They spent hundreds of billions of dollars to learn how to get the thing. And advertising isn't aimed at your frontal lobes, your cerebral cortex. It's aimed at the brainstem, that reptile brain, that fish brain, way deep inside your brain. And it doesn't matter how smart you are, or it will go right through and affect that. And really, especially with digital, that's why they went to digital technologies with television, so subliminals cannot be detected. And basically, there is no way to protect yourself from that other than to avoid the source of the propaganda. So, my number one thing, if you want to feel better, if you want to like get rid of that confusion, the number one thing you can do is stop watching television and the movies. These things are there. They're literally there to program you. And if you don't want to be programmed, you need to go away from that and let the inner core of the inner essence of yourself come out. And actually, one of the best ways to do that is to be in nature. All of the electronic stuff, your phone, your computer, television, everything, even the radio, and just be in nature as a natural being in nature. And that's really something that I think can bring people back into focus.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
where we belong.
Yeah. And you might go through some withdrawal for the first little while. You'll get like itchy, like you won't know what to do. But eventually you start to find everything winds down. You'll see this with kids all the time. If you bring kids out to a cottage or something like that, and they're used to being in the city, they go a little antsy for the first while because they don't know what to do when they're not being overstimulated by everything. But eventually you start to find that they're actually enjoying themselves out on the water, in the beach, on the rocks, like just basically entertaining themselves with nature. And Ken, I talked to a guest a long time back, a really amazing guest, Dr. Stuart Shanker. He's one of the main guys in Canada for research around self-regulation. He's written a number of books around it, particularly self-regulation with kids. And he talked about a book called Evil by Design. And he basically talked about dopamine hijacking and how it is a absolute art that they are able to actually do this, that they know how to manipulate. This is in games, this is in social media, everything they do is designed to just get you hooked. And most of the time, we're just not going to be aware of it. The vast majority of people are, first of all, they're not even aware that that's even possible. And even if they are, they're still going to get hooked. So when you think of some of these games like, Candy Crush or some of these different games that just went crazy, I mean, they are masters at how to manipulate our biochemistry. So don't think that that's not happening. Like Ken mentioned, these are multi-million million dollar businesses. They know what to do, and that's their business, is to figure out how to hijack the senses. So pull away from it and get back inside of here and see what direction you would like to take your life once you're taking the directives from inside.
Yeah, I think, you need to, before you can hear the voice inside, you've got to still or silence those voices from the outside, because they're just shouting and they cover up what's really inside of you. Because the only one is responsible for your health, for your destiny, is yourself. You're the one that's going to pay the consequences. And if you give that away to somebody else, you're in trouble, because they're going to use it for their benefit, not for your benefit. And the government is not your friend. It's the state is not your friend. You have to really take control of your own destiny. And it's not easy. We've been programmed from birth. There's a lot of problems, especially in our childhoods that have to be dealt with. That's like you need, sometimes people need therapy to go back and fix the problems that happened back then. Because look, as parents, none of our parents were perfect. But then again, we're not perfect either. So, mistakes were made for a variety of reasons. But it doesn't mean that, you're crippled for life. You can heal that, but you have to actually know it happened, find out what happened, and then learn the techniques for healing that so you can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked to people that have been through, even when you talk about trauma, like horrendous trauma, and they've come out, they've cleaned stuff up. So we all are conditioned in some regard, whether just through upbringing, through society, through cultures. So that's standard. But to step back and try and get an idea of what's the difference. We're so used to thinking the way that we have been brought up, but a lot of times if you get different sets of information, then it feels different inside you, and you will make very different choices in your life. So Ken, thanks so much. I think that's a wrap. So I think that gives some people some things to think about. And yeah, write us in, let us know what you think. And if you can, separate out for a week or so, really try and take some time off and let these things set in. I'd love to hear some feedback from people as far as what they found just taking a week off. Ken, thank you very much.
Glad to be on.